This webinar is being recorded, and our presenter today is Renee Moravec, and she will do a little bit more of an introduction for you. But let's go ahead, and we almost have everybody voted. We'll just wait a second yet. And for those of you that are just joining us, we are taking a quick poll here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And Renee, can you see the poll?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, it looks like 15% responded that yes, they saw it, 33% said yes, but only looked through it partially, and 52% have not had an opportunity to look through the quick guide yet.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
All right, thank you, Renee.
All right, thanks. Thanks for coming today, too. We wanted to make sure we presented this to you. We do have the quick guides out. I'll give you a little bit of a history on those quick guides. But first of all, as you said, I am Renee Moravec. I'm a speech-language pathologist on the Grant Wood AEA Brain Injury Resource Team. I'm also on the Governor's Advisory Board for the brain injuries. And so we thought, as we put this book out there for people, and they're starting to get mailed out to the AEAs, and we also have it on the website so people can access it. I was asked to see if I could go and talk through the booklet and just give an overview. Today I don't really want to read it to you, obviously, because that would not be exciting at all. And so what I wanted to do is just make sure I have the guide there on the board. I tried to put it onto a PowerPoint format the best I could, and the idea is that if we can just look through it, kind of glance through it, talk about it. I know you have access to it, so I'm not going to read everything through there. What I wanted to do is give you a little bit of some history about the booklet, is why we brought this out to you, and why we think it's important. Obviously, there's so much in the news the last couple of years. There have been so many things about concussions and head injuries, and whether it's because of the war or because of sports. There's also been so many more students receiving different syndromes and different brain injuries of various kinds coming into the schools. I've had students with strokes in the buildings, and we just want to make sure that we can give information to the schools, to staff, to parents about what we can do and possibly help with you and help you with these students at school. So at our AEA, at Grant Wood AEA, our brain injury resource team wanted to put together a PowerPoint and a booklet, kind of a flip booklet that would be easy access for everyone to kind of look through, to kind of see what they could do. And so what we did is we put together a flip book, and it actually had tabs at one point that you could hopefully get through and flip through. But as we were getting ready to put that together, we thought, well, now we need to make sure we can publish it somehow, and we thought we had some way to finance that, and it wasn't looking like it was going to work out as well. So when I went to one of my meetings for the advisory council, and they were looking for a project, I mentioned this booklet, and they thought, that would be very good. It would be very useful for this grant that we have called the HRSA grant. A HRSA grant is basically what that is it's the Health Resources and Services Administration, and they provide grants to be able to help produce these things, like various things that they've done in the past, but this is the booklet that they helped fund so we could get this out to you. And so we wanted to make sure that we are aware that the HRSA grant was available to us, and they said this would be a great tool to get out there. And so through many drafts and fixes and everything, we were able to get this booklet together and finally sent out to some people. And I know some nurses were able to receive it because of the Epilepsy Foundation being able to present at some of their things that they had, some of their conferences. So we thought now it would be good to maybe actually share that, and when the Brain Injury Alliance asked if we could at least talk about it, we thought that would be great. So it's been a couple of years in coming, actually, but and that's kind of the synopsis, I guess you could say, but we are at Grantwood are really glad that they were able to support us and to help put this booklet together. So what we were wanting to do is look at the book today and share that with you. I do want to make sure I acknowledge some people. Obviously, the Governor's Advisory Council for helping us get this out. Also, the University of Iowa, the Center for Disabilities and Development. They had some information that was useful in helping us with that. The Grantwood AEA team, and obviously the HRSA grant. Jeff Lauer, Tasha Retz from the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. Megan Hartwig, which was from the Iowa Department of Public Health. Roxanne from Epilepsy Foundation of Iowa. But I'm hoping I'm missing somebody. Oh, Emily Eminen, she's with the Brain Injury Chapter here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, and was also helpful in writing some of the case studies for the booklet. So we really were pleased with that. So I hope that, just to give you kind of a background of how many hands were involved with that, we were just so pleased. So like I said, the book format is now not with the tabs. The tabs cost a little bit more, but it does have a way you can flip through it and look through, and there's a table of contents at the front of it so you can kind of look through the pages easily. So what I did is the brain injury in the booklet, you'll see this brain injury statistics page, and it'll mention some things about what are some of the statistics as far as the Centers for Disease and Control Prevention, what were some of their numbers, and you can see on there, if you have your booklet with you, if not, you can see on my page here that it's at least 1.7 million people sustain a traumatic brain injury in the United States each year. And you think about that, 52,000 of those die from that. And so we know that there is much involved. There's much to it. The Iowa Department of Public Health also has some data that is there. And if you have your booklet, you'll have the websites that are at the bottom. If you don't have a booklet and you want to write those down, I'll leave it on this page a little bit so you can kind of get those pages. If you're wanting more statistics, that just kind of gives you a little bit of a background. But as I said earlier, there's so many things that are going on with the brain injuries anymore. Falls is one of the #1 reasons for brain injuries. You also have crashes. You have being struck by something, especially like in the sports area. So I won't go through all those statistics, but I did want you to look at that because there are some they mentioned some things about the TBI in children aged 0 to 17 in Iowa specifically, and that's why we wanted to get this out. Also, then on the next page of your booklet, if you're following along, that's page 5 of your booklet, there are different levels of brain injury severity, obviously, and I know many of you probably know that there's obviously mild, moderate, and severe. And as you look at those, you can see, again, some statistics about what goes along with those. But what I want to mention about this specifically is that the mild TBIs sometimes are the ones that they might go into the hospitals and someone will say, oh, I think they're fine, let them rest a couple days and then they'll be fine. And the thing is, we know that that's not always the case, because then we see them and something is, we might think is not quite right with the student, something they're not able to focus, and we see those differences, and that's why this is called a silent epidemic, because we don't see the physical part of the injuries, we just see that something, they aren't able to function, whether it's through executive functioning or the various parts of that that they just aren't able to do. And so we see that as the mild part. The severe and the moderate you may be able to pick up on, but the mild, they don't have those physical abilities all the time, and they're quiet, and they kind of sneak by us. So I wanted you to be aware of that, and that's why, to me, it's so important for us to be aware of these students. They're not just those students who are trying to be lazy or trying to get by with something. There really is more to it. I did put the brain anatomy on here. probably almost any place you go, if they're going to talk about executive functioning or anything that might have anything to do neurologically, they're going to give you a little bit of a background, because we just don't always know who knows what. And that's kind of what I'm doing today. And so that basic brain anatomy, we have given that in the booklet so that you have an idea. If you know, oh yeah, somebody fell and they hit the front of their head, maybe they then have some areas in the frontal lobe that are damaged, and so then you can see the frontal lobe is responsible for at least some of those things. I'm not saying it's all has to be in one area. They do kind of interconnect, but it at least gives you some idea of what may be affected if there's damage to the frontal lobe or the occipital lobe, just kind of a very basic view. So we want to do at least to have some of that background, because that does, when I go out to these observations for my students and I read their reports about where the damage was, and then I want to know, like if they fell and they hit their head forward in a crash, or maybe let's say they're in a crash, they hit their head on something and they hit the frontal lobe, and then because of the way they reacted, they may have a contra-coup effect where their head and the brain was going back and forth. And so they may have other damaged areas too besides the frontal lobe. And so I look at that so I can help the teachers know what they need to be aware of and how we can help them in the different areas. So I'm not going to get into in-depth about the anatomy, but I do think it's important that when you are looking for that, that you know that those areas are there. I hope you all can hear me, because I have a little pink note that says that you may be experiencing some network connection problems. So we'll try to keep holding on, and I'll keep on going. Hopefully you can still hear me. In the booklet there then is a part that talks about challenges. And we know that there are many challenges with those with trauma to the brain. We just know that there's, like I said, mild injuries to severe injuries. And as you look through the different areas here, there it talks about behavior. And on the screen you'll see where it says students with brain injury are at greater risk for behavioral challenges. A lot of that's because of impulse too. But all behavior, even disruptive behavior, has a purpose. And we need to figure out what that is. And so as we look through those different areas, how can we help those students? We know that behavior challenges will diminish or can diminish if they are addressed systematically. And that's why we have in the booklet then the page that looks at how do you assess and address behavior challenges. And we looked at how you define the behavior. How do you give examples of, if you give a weak example, people aren't going to know how you're to look for things. You need to see what you see and how often it happens. And then you look at the antecedent, the behavior, the consequences. You need to really look specifically at those details, because I know when I go out, I look at every little thing and I write everything down that I see. And then I look back through my notes and I can then compare and see it. Am I seeing something that's consistent? Am I looking at things that happen over and over again? If they're staring off, is it 10 seconds? Is it 15 seconds? I need to look for those specifics. And that way I can determine what's happening with that student. So these things here are in the guide are a way for you to look up some things, maybe know what's going on. How do you identify those pieces so that you know what to look for and how you can help that student? Again, there is a website, so if you don't have the booklet, please write that down. I'm trying to pause as I talk or give you time to write any of those yellow websites down. If you want to write those down, if you don't have the booklet, go ahead and do so. That's why I'm trying to keep on the page a little longer at times. Then we look at the psychosocial challenges. And what we do in this book to help you out, we try to keep the same format. When we created this, we wanted to make sure we put down what are some possible challenges in each area, what are some strategies, and then we would do a case study. And throughout that booklet then, you'll see this over and over again, so that way we aren't jumping around from, okay, we're going to do all the challenges under psychosocial, all the challenges under behavior, all the challenges under speech. We try to keep it all together so it just makes sense to us, and hopefully to you too. So the psychosocial challenges, you can see it lists what some of those challenges are: self-esteem, self-control, self-awareness, all those areas there. And then we do lay out some strategies that can be used. Like one of them, the social groups that play games but have some structure to them. They're wonderful. You can help direct the conversation. I actually use this a lot with some of my students. I have a social group where I will grab a game and we talk about the game and set it up. We'll play it 3 times throughout the next 3 weeks. And one time we play it, and that's just teaching them that and see how well they take the information, how well they understand the information. The second time I play it, they have to give me the directions and see if they can explain it back to me and see if they can actually tell or share some information. So then I can look at memory, I can look at conversation, I can look at many different issues that might come up. The third time we play it, we do it again, and I look at how are they doing the conversation. Are they using idioms, figurative language? Do they understand idioms and figurative language? If we make a change in the game to change the rules, are they able to do that change? So I really look at a lot when I do those with my students, and that's why in there it says it's structured. I let them play, but we also there's a reason to what I do. It's not just to have fun with the games. And so that's just some of the ideas. I do use a lot of hidden rules. We talk about those and how some students just don't understand rules. And we'll look at when you do those rules, how you do those rules, when do they apply, what's expected, what's unexpected. All those things come into play. So I will look at those. You can also see some of the other strategies that are there, but I wanted to at least mention at least the ones I know I use when I do some of these things in my therapy. It does then go ahead and talk about some case studies, and they provide that. I'm not going to talk all the way through it, but at least when you're doing the book, since this is an overview of the book and not a whole lesson, I am not going to do all the case studies, but the case studies are there. So if you think, hey, I have a student who has psychosocial challenges, you could turn to that page, see if any of these would help fit, and then you can have some ideas. For the people at our school or our AEAs, they can use some of these ideas, and then as they call us in to observe, we can give them more. But this is just, like I said, a quick guide. It's not going to be every need that might come up, but it might help you with some of them. We also look at the physical, sensory, motor challenges because we do have some students who have had the shaken baby syndrome, and some of them do have some vision and hearing aspects that we need to identify and to at least work with and give the teacher suggestions. And so we do look at the challenges. I've had students who have been in accidents and lost their hearing. I've had students, because of that shaken baby syndrome, they can't see very well. And so we look at what are some things we can do to help out, and how do we get them the people that can also support them. But you can see that there are strategies listed, how they can provide those. And then we also have named our students in here that there's a case study. Obviously the names are not the names of anybody that we serve, because we're not going to do that and put that out there. We just wanted to put a name to something, so that way we have, it's easier to read rather than just always say the student, the student. So we did want to put at least a name to that, and maybe kind of combine some of the people we have worked with in the past, maybe get some basic ideas, but it's not one student, and it's not any student's name, just so you need to make sure I put that in there so you're aware of it. Also, just so you see, we have things with other perceptual challenges, such as the visual and auditory, more specifically, how they recognize the objects. So we have the challenges we have things listed above. We have visual perceptual strategies and auditory perceptual strategies there for you. And some of these you might think, well, gosh, one of them says check for understanding. Isn't that what we do always in our 504s and our other accommodations? And yeah, that's true. But I think some people take it for granted and just say, well, we always put that in. That's kind of the standard thing you write when you do a 504, or accommodations or modifications in the class. And I think that's true, but sometimes people just write them down and they don't really put it to use. They don't attach anything to it, why we're doing this. There is a reason for our students, and a lot of it is because they really don't get it, is that they just don't understand because of the injury or some injury of some sort. And we need to really actually think about that. When we say check for understanding or clear directions, give those clear directions, there's a purpose. It's not just because the student's lazy, and I can't stress that enough. Anyway, so perceptual challenges are there. We have the case study that's listed on there for people. Again, I'm not going to read through all of it because I want to make sure we get all the way through the book. Then we have attention challenges. The attention challenges, of course, is something I think a lot of us see anyway, with the focusing, the filtering out distractions, initiating. Initiating has been quite recently more and more that people are becoming aware of that part of attention or that part of the executive function piece, but initiating tasks, it's like, well, they just don't get started. They sit there and they don't do anything. They just look, and I don't know why they don't get started. Well, because they don't know how to start. Maybe they need that cue to start. And so I'm always making some work tasks, so I make things for my teachers to help remind the students to get started on the next task. And we talked about how we can do that. So whether it's making a list of things that they need to do and on a laminated paper that we can put on their desk or by their desk, and then the teacher writes down the steps that they need to do on their desk, then that's what we try to do. So that otherwise we just can't, we need to make sure we can get that information to them. Let's see here. Now, obviously there are more strategies that are listed there. I won't go through all of them. Just a nice reminder to pay attention. A tap on the desk sometimes is all they need to know, or a point to where they need to get started. Sometimes you have to go as far as putting a green dot on the front of one and a red dot at the end to show where they start and where they end. And I've done that with students too. Again, we mentioned this case study, and you can look through those. Again, they're meant to be your help, your guide. It's not going to cover everyone's questions about everything, and I understand that. If we try to do that, we'd have a much thicker book. But we wanted to at least give you some information. The memory and learning challenges, basically we look there, we look at recalling events, following a schedule, registering new information. Those are key pieces also. That part about following the schedule thing, when I go out to the schools, I have people say that, well, they know their schedule. I don't think they need a list. But the thing is, I've had students in the past who could tell me their schedule, but the moment they had to try to do their schedule, they couldn't. I had students walking by in one of my schools I used to be in. She would walk by my door and say, now do I go here next? I said, yes, you do. Look at your schedule. Remember to look at your schedule. And she always would stop by my room to just ask, where do I go next? And so that's why we had created a schedule for her, and it made a big difference. But when we were told, well, she knows her schedule, no, she could tell you it, but she doesn't know how to do it. We have people who could tell you how to get to Des Moines, too, but they maybe aren't able to always drive there. They just can't put that into a routine. So following a schedule is very important for many of our students. And so that's why we want to make sure we can use those. But those might be the things that we're looking at as far as what are the memory pieces, match their learning style, routinely summarize and restate information are some of the things you'll see in strategies. I know we need to make sure we say something, maybe say it again a different way, repeat it. We may think, well, that's how many times do I have to give that information? But for those students, sometimes they have to hear it at least 3 times and maybe still have it in writing. And maybe on their desk, not just on the board, because you can't always move from the board to your papers in front of you. You need it sometimes beside you or close to you instead of on the wall away from you. So those are just some ideas of things to look for. Are they things you've seen on 504s before? Yes, they probably are. Are they things you see in IEPs? Yes, they probably are. But when you do these on those papers, when you write these, just be aware of how important they are. And it's not just a list you write just to do it. There's a purpose for them. Again, we have the memory learning challenges continued. The orientation strategies are there that we can help, how can we help the students with those things. We have the challenge, the case study that works with memory. Again, those should be helpful, at least how we did those and how we put those onto the IEP. We try to do that with all the case studies, not just give you a challenge, not just give you the strategies, but maybe what you might have written on the IEP 504 plan. We try to put that for every one of them. Executive function challenges. This has kind of been the buzzword for the last couple of years, and it's everywhere. And I know in our AEA we've had a couple classes already, and I'll share about some other things coming up here for our AEA anyway, and I'm sure you would all be welcome to join us. Executive function challenges is a piece that's, you see books and studies and classes now all the time, and that's what you're going to see because of the concussions or brain injuries, and not just with them. I mean, with autism and many other syndromes and other maybe just some disorders, that you're going to see some of those areas affected. So we thought this was definitely something we had to make sure we cover, such as the initiating, which I mentioned before, monitoring, making decisions, planning, knowing where to start on a task. I mentioned some of those before in some of those other areas with memory as well, but just wanted to make sure that we really stress that executive function area because all of that is a part of that. It goes together. Strategies, again, it's listed. Explicitly redirect student back to a task. Sometimes just saying, everybody look at your book doesn't mean that student's going to, because they may not realize that includes them. And so we need to make sure that we are able to pull them in somehow. I guess we don't want to always say their name and say, Bobby, come back to class, or pay attention. I know that we don't always want to do that, but sometimes we have to, or at least just a tap. And I've got some wonderful teachers who have been doing that, so that's been great. Limit the number of steps in a task. You don't want to give it to them all at one time. For our high school students that I work with, if they have a long project that covers several weeks, they don't know how to break it down. They don't know how to split that up into smaller pieces. So it's always good if they can say, okay, this part should be done by this week, and this part by this week. If they have a list of something explicit and specific, it helps them out. And I know that's more work for the teachers. I do know that. But the student is not able to take that information if we don't somehow make some of those adjustments for that student. And since we have some schools that I work with have these smart boards, the Promethean boards, and that's connected to your computer. You put it on the board, and you just can print it off. And that way the student would have a copy of it. So that's been actually an awesome tool. So we have our case studies. Again, for that, same thing, challenge, what's the strategy, how do we put it on the plan, the IEP or the 504 plan, how can we use those skills? And so we put that on there for you. Again, I'm not going to read it for you. I know you either have the book or will be getting the book, or have downloaded the book. Communication language challenges. This is one where we wanted to make sure that if a student cannot communicate or does not understand what you are communicating to them, it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to be able to function in the classroom. And so we broke those different areas down because we know that language, the social communication, articulation, the voice, those are all a part of sometimes getting hit or having a brain injury. How severe it is all determined about where it took place, whether it's local, is it more global, what is going on and where was the brain affected. And so we want to make sure we know that makes a big difference in whether it's mild or profound. We also want to make sure we know that two students with similar brain injury will not have the same outcome, because there are some who may be going into surgery for brain tumors and have had the same basic place, the same basic issue with the tumor. They go in for the surgery, a very similar surgery, and one comes out doing wonderfully, and one comes out from that surgery unable to walk, unable to speak clearly. It all depends. You may have the same injury or effect, maybe done different ways, maybe how your brain takes that information. It's not going to be the exact same thing, so one cure doesn't work for everybody, and are they really cured? So I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Again, the common changes, we have a challenge, a strategy, some strategies for the articulation, voice, feeding, hearing. Obviously in the schools, the speech pathologist is not always the one who does more of the swallowing in the schools, but in the hospitals they do more of that. The hearing, you can see some areas that might be affected. We look at the word finding skills with challenges. Again, the strategies, what are some ways you can help with helping them find those words that it's like on the tip of their tongue, they just can't think of it, and what are some ways we can help them do some of those things with the word finding, and then a case study for that. The other thing we look at is also communication language challenges with comprehension. And so you're looking at the spoken and written language. What are some things with the misuse of question-answer forms, appearing to be highly distracted? There are many different areas we can look at that as well. And so we want you to be sure that as you look at this book, you can see that we see some of these challenges. Maybe you can find one as you look through it. What are the challenges and what are some of the strategies that are in there? And then we did a case study as well. So kind of skimming through that part of it. We looked at the pragmatic language as well, the ability to understand, function, the rules and roles during the social communication exchange. And so we look at the challenges that might be as part of that, whether it's turn taking, understanding the body language. I have some students a lot of times too that when I look at this and actually some of the other different language and communication things, besides the pragmatic part, we're looking at how they understand that prosody too of the person's speech. How are they using their voice? Are they saying, "What did you do?" or "What did you do?" And what's the difference in that? What's the feeling in that? They don't always pick up those skills that go with those areas, and so we need to help direct them and teach them. But that shows you the challenges, and then we did another case study. And sometimes I feel like I'm rushing through this. I apologize for that, but I know I want to make sure we get this done for you. So in each of these, then like I said, we have an area. Hopefully you can identify with something in there. You can look back to those books. Find the area that maybe is something that you are wondering about. What's a way we can maybe help and get some ideas from the booklet. And then if you need other help, there are other people you can contact too. I do want us to make sure we look at the roles of technology because there's technologies everywhere, and it can be used as so much of a part of these students in their lives, whether it's high tech or low tech. Tech doesn't have to be the biggest and best thing ever. Sometimes it's just a couple pictures, or like I said before, I'll take papers and then laminate them or put contact paper on them and help put them on the teachers' desks. So that we can, whether it's the teacher's desk, the students' desks, put them on the walls, something that can help lead the kids through all these things that they have to deal with. So low tech, again, might be pictures, lists, like I mentioned before, maybe a place where you can put a list. So if you want to put it on a laminated part, like I said earlier, you can write on the list, and then when it's completed, you can erase it, and then you have another spot for that, a list for the next segment of what they're working on. We've used label makers before for some of my students to, if they needed to, they can't write, but we want to do a spelling test. We've done label makers to have them do the spelling tests, and then they print it off and give it to the teacher. We've done it that way. So there's things you can do with low tech. We can also do some high tech. such as the iPads, which I know many of you are aware of, but there are so many text-to-speech things, recording devices, reminders on their calendars. You have Dragon Naturally Speaking. They have smart pens out there that some students love to use because that pen is wonderful when you're taking notes. You can record what the person's saying as you're taking a note, and then if you don't remember what they said, you can go back and tap that spot that you wrote on before, and the pen finds that same part of that conversation, that part of that speech the person was, the leader or speaker was giving, and it can say exactly what he was saying at that time. It just finds it, and it's an awesome tool for some people. It doesn't work for everybody though, but it for some people works wonderfully. The Fusion and Alpha Smart tools are out there and available for those who need to do that for note-taking as well. So there's many low-tech and high-tech things. Our phones, people I know take pictures sometimes of their steps of how they do things, and then they put it on their phone so they can kind of look through if they can't remember how they were supposed to do it, or people who've taken pictures of in the parking lots, as long as you take the right picture, not of a car that's beside you that might move and it's not there, so then you get lost. But basically, if you take a picture of where you, an area, like the elephant area of Disney World or something like that, you can do that. Again, there are many text-to-speech applications and devices on the computer. A lot of them are free, and they may have some computer voices, but not too bad. Some students have cochlear implants or may need to get a cochlear implant, and they just use a variety of communication devices such as the Dynavox and the WeGo, and some of those that my students are working with as well. So hopefully that helps you with some of those. Kind of trying to incorporate those into the classroom. This talks about, this page here in our booklet talks about how you can incorporate those. It kind of shares maybe some ideas. We put 3 different pieces on there, kind of like a case study or case management case study for these students, kind of a summary. Anyway, one talks about an elementary student who had a wheelchair. I can see I just made a typing error on there, so you have to excuse that one on the transfer over. But talk about a preschool student and how he might use an iPad for his communication, like the Proloquo to Go is a good thing. I'll say that again, Proloquo to Go. It's so easy to roll off your mouth, and it just goes too fast sometimes. But we've also used FaceTime with a student who is homebound, and we're able to, because we wanted him to be social, we would use FaceTime with the classroom teacher during one of the community circles, and he could see the kids, they could see him, and it worked out wonderfully for him. And now we're starting to get him into the school for a couple hours, 2 or 3 times a week. So we're getting there. And then I also mentioned the high schooler. So those are some other ideas of how you get into the classroom. We did put some ideas in case people don't know how to do the student support teams. We listed many of them on there on the book, such as, obviously the student's family is part of the team, the peers. Some of the peers might be on the team because they could maybe be helpful. Teachers, school staff, nurse, the AEA staff, and then your outside OTs, PTs as well. The SLPs, the physician, a neurologist. It mentions again some more of those, the neuropsychologist and the neuro-ophthalmologist, which we don't have very many in Iowa. I think we have, I may be wrong. I think there's 2. There was 1, I think there may be 2 now, and I'm sorry if I don't know the exact answer, but they can give you more details, but they look a little bit more into that area of visual problems. Social worker, direct care worker, and then the neuroscience facilitation. Those are pieces that could be a part of the team. Recognizing brain injury when it happens. Again, we kind of go over a little bit of this just to make sure that after you've seen all these, well, when is it actually brain injury? When is it something that has occurred? Especially when it just starts to happen. I mean, I've had some students that, I was with a student who, outside of school, had hit her head. And I knew that we had 30 minutes, 60 minutes. 30 minutes as a guide, we prefer that, but definitely less than an hour to get them someplace, because if they're starting to feel sick and have some of these other issues that you can see on your screen, you want to get them there as soon as possible and not wait. If they've had a concussion because of an injury, like during a football game, don't wait till you're on your way home on the bus. Make sure you have them, get them to a place where they can have some help as soon as possible. I know you have some physical trainers that can help with that, but if you wait till like 3 or 4 hours later, then the issues could be worse. So it's better to get in sooner and than later. Obviously, you'll see some of these things too: the emotional mood, sleep. It's important to remember that a student may look fine even though they're acting or feeling different. They may look like, oh, they're doing fine, they're just acting a little different today, but there may be more to it. Again, that silent, it's just a concussion. They'll be fine, they'll be back. We've got to look at that a little bit more. The CDC recommendations are there as far as what you would do for medical assistance if you're in that situation. We do cover the seizures because we do have students who in our schools are having seizure disorders, and more. In fact, in one of my buildings, I've got about 4 students already that have that, and so we just need to make sure we're aware of that. They're coming into our buildings more and more, and we need to be ready to help them out. And so seizure, it talks about seizures, strategies for students with seizures, some things you might want to do. So if you have that student in your school, you think, hey, I'm going to look here. I want to see what maybe if there's things I need to be aware of. Obviously, your school nurse has some training. They have the Epilepsy Foundation can come into the schools and do some training. We've done that and had them come out to visit before, share a little bit with the teachers. Here at this AEA, we had them be involved with one of our conferences, our workshops. It talks about seizures, what you need to know. What are some things that you might want to be aware of, so that if you see somebody in your classroom who has a possibility or maybe might have that seizure, here's some things to be aware of and what you can do. So be aware of those. Again, important tips to remember: brain injury cannot always be seen. It's just because a student doesn't have physical symptoms, it doesn't mean that they don't have an injury. Please be patient with them. It takes a while. Like anything else, it takes a while to come back and rebuild those pathways. Think outside the box. You can't just do the same old all the time. Maybe we can put a new twist on it. Focus on their strengths and what we can do to help use those strengths. Brain injury tends to respond better to positive consequences rather than negative. Nonverbal or written cues can be more helpful than verbal cues sometimes, because verbal, you have to process it, and if someone's firing those verbal cues at you, it helps to have a written format. And so we want to make sure that you're aware of that. Give as few instructions at one time as possible, rather than listing 10 steps or 10 things and then say, now go for it. Maybe break it down. Let's do this part first. Now, after 10 minutes, you go, or whatever you need to get that done. Now let's do this second step. It all depends on whether you're doing science or a long project. It just depends on how you would break that down, but it does help to break that down. There are a few more on there. I know you guys can read those. I share us a few more, but please remember they're very important for us to use. Impulsivity is common after brain injury, and so we need to they just don't know how to guide that anymore, or how to look for that. To learn more, in the booklet we have these sites, and obviously this is recorded, so you can always come back to it and look at that part again. If you want to get any of these websites, we try to make sure that we put them on here so you have more of a resources, so that when you're looking at things and think, yeah, the things in the book, yeah, it's covering some of this, but I want some more information too. These are the places you can go. I'm going to go ahead and flip through because there's too many for you if you're writing them down to keep up. But again, you do have access to it. I would definitely write down the Governor's Advisory Council on Brain Injuries right in the middle of your page, because I know they have a copy of this book on there, and you can, it's a PDF copy, you can download that one. And I know that we do have other websites on our council website that you can look at. We've archived some of them. We've sent them to the AEAs, and some of the AEAs are starting to archive them as well. And so some of the AEAs, I know ours has begun to do that. I don't know about all of them. I know ours is. But they're archiving some of those webinars as well, some from the past. And I'm assuming since this is being recorded that this might be archived. Maybe? I'm hinting there on our website. So if we can do that, that'd be awesome. Some helpful books. Coaching Students with Executive Skills Deficits is a really good book. Our Brain Injury Resource Team is doing a book study on that one right now, actually, but a great book. Peg Dawson is an awesome speaker. If you ever have a chance to hear her, she was here a couple weeks ago, I believe it was, and really good talk. There's also the source books. The source book for traumatic brain injury, children and adolescents is a good book. It's kind of one of those quick guides. Same thing as that source for executive function disorders. A lot of tools, covers a lot of things. Just awesome books if you need to look up something and want to find some tools. So those are great. The others are too. I'm just mentioning those specifically because those are the ones I really, really like. We did want to make sure we mentioned the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and managing students with seizures. Those are other areas you might want to look at as well. And some other learning opportunities. We're going to cut it close here for questions. But we do have, like I said, the BI, the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa, has a website. They have many things. I know that the HRSA grant, besides doing the booklet, has supported us with many other things, whether it's through webinars, such as some things like this, like we're doing today, as well as the booklet. But the Brain Injury Alliance also has some things that you can look there. I know I put our AEA on here because we have a Supporting Brain Functioning in the Classroom class coming up on February 11th from 8:30 to 11:30. And we're going to be talking about those things on that day. And if you go to our website, you can look at professional development and kind of sign on there. We're also doing a Building Executive Functioning class. It's at night, starting in January. I would tell you what that is to sign up for it, but when I looked yesterday, it was not on there yet. But if you check back to our professional development, I know it should be on there soon, and you can sign up for that class as well. The Iowa Department of Public Health, they have some items as well that you can look at. And I've also put, again, the Iowa Department of Health, but specifically the ACBI, also the HRSA grant. Like I said, there are webinars, and the quick book is there for you to find. I did put Maggie's email on there. Maggie is our contact for our brain injury group there for the council, and she is where we have our books, and so we are sending them out there. I'm not saying all of you to start writing her to get those books, but I'm just saying that we have some books there, and we prefer if you go ahead and download them. That'd be awesome, because we do have the books that are there spoken for the AEAs, and but she's very helpful in helping to find some things as well. Hopefully they don't mind me doing that, Maggie. I thought I put that on there. And then you'll see that there's also a SurveyMonkey part on there, because that's the site. I think she's going to send you SurveyMonkey access to that, so you can, let us know how this was, and tell us a little bit more about the survey, how things were with this webinar, and if you need more information. So I put those on there. You can write those down. And I know I want to make sure I have time for us to do some questions, and do my best to answer them if I can. Maggie, are we ready for that?
Sure, and if people, I did get a couple of questions in, so if people do want to use the question box, or if you raise your hand, I'll try and get to you that way. If you want to speak your question, I can unmute you. But go ahead and type those into the question box. As I said, I did get a couple in, but I did want to reiterate, yes, feel free to contact me if you do have a request for hard copies. I do have some extra books that I could send out. I'm hopeful, though, that if you're part of a school or other organization, that maybe you can pool your folks together so that we have just one shipment going out instead of sending 10 separate books to the same location. That would be helpful on my end. Maybe save us a little bit of shipping, and then we can put our money towards reproducing more books instead. So let's see, as she said, I'm going to be sending out attendance certificates, and during that time I'll send you the link to the website where you can view more of our archived webinars. I did learn, though, we have an issue with those archived webinars currently, and I'm working to get those back online again. But the PDF of the QuickBook is there. If you'd like to just be able to download it, that is available for you there. So one of the first questions, Renee, was, is it appropriate to mention acquired brain injury, such as including birth injuries, etc., being different in definition but having similar behavior challenges / learning needs?
Is it appropriate, you said?
Is it appropriate to mention that acquired brain injury, such as birth injuries, etc., are being different in definition but having similar behavior challenges and learning needs?
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot of times. It is appropriate to sometimes mention that the acquired brain injury, because we look at all those acquired, whether they're acquired or, let's say, like at birth, where they have anoxia, if there's different things that are going on, they are in the brain injury. At least in our state, what we're looking at is those are part of the brain injury, but they all have different issues, things that do come up. But they are part of the brain injury piece, and yeah, it is appropriate to mention the acquired with that, as well as those things that maybe they had at birth. Do we always address those here at the schools or stuff? We try, but we can't address everything, I know, but there are so many things that come into that neurological realm. And I hope that answers your question appropriately.
Okay. And the next question that we have, thank you, Renee, do you come to schools to observe kids and then help write IEP goals for students?
What we do here at this AEA is we go out to the schools and we observe, and after I do an observation, at least for me, what I do is I go out and spend 2 to 4 hours, sometimes observing a student, so it's not just a little time slot. If I need to go out, I'll go out again and get some more things if I need to. But I observe, and then after I observe, I write up a report with suggestions and ideas. And then after we do that, I meet with the teachers and the parents at one time and talk about things that we saw and things that they can do to help. And I have at times talked to a couple of teachers and tried to guide them in some of their ideas that they could have for goals. But do we write that for them completely? No. But I have no problem of sitting there and giving suggestions or ideas of what I think we could do. I know I've helped with a few teachers in the past of some ideas of goals that we might have used in the past. So yes and no. Yes, we do that. I don't know about all AEAs if they operate the same way as we do, but that's what I can answer for you.
Okay, and the first question, the asker of the question said thank you, so you must have answered her question sufficiently. So any other questions that might be out there, now would be a good time. And I'm looking to see if anybody raised their hand so that they could ask verbally. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any more questions at this time. As I said, I will be sending out those certificates of attendance, as well as a link to the survey. There is a survey as well that goes along with the quick guide, and so I will provide that as well. So any questions that you have, please do email me, Maggie Ferguson, at the email that was provided during the slides. And I guess I thank you, Renee, for providing that overview for us.
Thank
And
you.
everybody have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.